so that's good. I will make sure that you get copies of these slides. So welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name's Ellen Goodwin. I'm the Clean Growth Lead at the New Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership. This is a second webinar of 6 in total that we are delivering as funded by the UK Government's Community Renewal Fund Road to Net Zero Business Support Programme. We have June with us here today, who's from Groundwork East. I will let June introduce herself, but I will just now share her slides. June, I don't think I have anything else to say particularly to you, so I may just I'll just hand over if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. Thanks, Ellen.
Right, I'm hoping you can see that.
Can everybody see the slides okay? Lovely. Okay. Well, my name's June Davenport. I'm the Sustainability Team Manager for Groundwork East. So Groundwork East is part of the Federation of Trusts that cover the whole of the England and Wales as well. Locally, I've been with them for 6 years, and I've been working on large-scale programs to do with energy efficiency and net zero work all of that time. And basically I run the team that has been working on various different projects to do with road to net zero that Alan's spoke about just now, and also there was B Anglia, and we've got the carbon charter. So some of the projects and services that we offer you may already be aware of. But today I've been asked to talk about starting the change and first steps to reducing emissions on the journey to road to net zero. So if you want to go to the next slide, please, Ellen. So what are the drivers for reducing your business carbon footprint? Well, at the moment, there's never been more drivers. And it may well be that all of them are appropriate to the businesses here. I should imagine everybody's been impacted by the increase in energy costs recently, and at the moment we don't see any that changing rapidly downwards again. So it's never been a better time to look at that in your business, the energy costs. Also, if you're operating your business and working with others on a procurement chain or directly with local authorities, then you'll be aware that more and more of them are asking about the climate change things that you're doing in their procurement tenders. In Suffolk, it's called the Climate Change Ask, that they've embedded now into their social value tenders. And so that's another driver for businesses to start their journey to net zero. If you've not got an environmental policy or you want to improve it, that's another driver. Also, many businesses are saying to us that staff are very much more engaged than they've ever been before. They've not only seen their own energy costs increase as householders, but they're also concerned about future prosperity and carbon emissions, because they're starting to see increased climate change impacts. So my colleague yesterday, Amy Courter, if you joined that webinar, was talking about carbon literacy and how impactful that can be for a business as well. So I'll touch on that again a bit later. But everyone else, you may find, in your business sector is setting net zero targets. So you don't want to be behind that, you want to be involved in that. So these are all key drivers for a business to start reducing their carbon footprint. Next slide, please. So whatever they are, whatever your drivers are for your business, remember, you can't change what you don't measure. So move on, please. So step one, I would say, is you need to find out where are your emissions coming from. So for most businesses that have premises, you've got to start thinking about the space and the water heating in that space, or the electric heating, the lighting. Do you use gas, oil, LPG, aircon? Has that been on a lot, because we've had one of the hottest ones ever last few months back? You've got to start thinking about what the whole business uses in terms of emissions. So the premises, the equipment, if you're in the production of manufacturing sector, transport, how reliant are you on logistics companies within the business or sending things out yourself? Waste disposal, what's happening to the waste in your business, because all carbon emissions are embedded in the waste that we throw away or recycle. And the value chain for the business, the products and services that you procure and your own products and services. So all of those things you need to start thinking about.
I'm sorry to ask, but there's a lot of background interference. I don't know if we can all just mute apart from June.
Oh, sorry, I wonder if that's my dog scratching. Does it sound like scratching?
No, it's like someone's breathing down the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, it is. It's a breathing noise. It's.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we all not breathe then? That was save some.
No.
I
tell you what,
dioxide.
I can mute mine, but I will have to just come out of sharing my slides. One moment.
Okay.
Let's see. It may well be me. Gosh.
Is that now any better?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry about the scratching dog if you do hear that. I have shut her out, but she likes to scratch on doors, unfortunately. So where emissions are coming from. So if you can think about that as a step one, and then we'll look at step two, please, Ellen, the next slide. So I don't know how aware you are as businesses of the way they categorise greenhouse gases, which are all of the gases in the clouds at the top of this slide. Traditionally, people think of carbon dioxide as CO2 as being the most problematic greenhouse gas, but actually it's methane, CH4, and also nitric oxide, N2O, and the others listed that all create the greenhouse effect. So back in 2001, they were looking at international protocols for how businesses could classify their activities into categories to actually work out what their emissions would be. If you were going to reduce, then you'd need to know where you're at, where your carbon footprint was at. So they decided to categorize them in these three scopes. Scope 1 in the middle being the direct activities from that company, so any vehicles that you have or facilities that you have for the business. And then scope 2, indirect emissions. So this is things like where you're purchasing electricity from the grid, heating and cooling for your own use. So those emissions are calculatable as well. And then the other things that businesses may not directly think about but are to do with them are the upstream activities, if you look at the arrows along the bottom, and the downstream activities, and they're indirect to the business, but they are very impactful. So you've got all the things that happen before things get to your business. So everything that you purchase, the goods and services, the capital goods, the fuel, energy related activities, transportation, distribution, waste, business travel, employee commuting, any leased assets that you have, they're all the upstream. And then we've got to look at the downstream. So what happens to your products that are sold? Because they're emitting throughout the lifetime of those products. And so it's really important that you understand why we specify them into different scopes. It's because it's an international protocol that everybody's working to. And so think about that when you're looking at your emissions for the business. So next slide, please. So although that's all great and all sciencey and greenhouse gas protocols is all great, but what does it actually mean for your own business? Because most people, when they first start on this journey, think, well, how do I ever get to know what my emissions are? I can't sit and work all of that out. I don't know what it would be for my business. But you do have information coming into your business that's really valuable already, and it will be particularly important for scopes 1 and 2, because it's all about getting to grips with the numbers. So you will have within your businesses, no doubt, your recent energy utility bills from the last 12 months. Most businesses probably keep those anyway. But if you don't, then start recording that information, because it's all useful to know what consumption you have. It's not just about paying them and the cost, it's the consumption we're after. So the kilowatt hours, the litres, if you're using oil, for example, if you're a rural business, gas bills, the vehicle fuel consumption, if you're running any vehicles within the business, or mileage fuel card data, your invoices, miles travelled, anything that you're collecting at the moment would be useful to get to grips with what your emissions will be in the future. Electricity consumption at your premises, so your meter bills. Now, I'm hoping that everyone is much more au fait with what these costs are now for the business. But have you thought about what that means in terms of kilowatt hours and consumption? Because the high energy cost is driving everyone to examine this far more than ever used to, which is really good in terms of meaning that you're more insightful about the business, because you know that energy is one of the highest costs at the moment for a business. So if you can go to the next slide, and we're looking at more at the scope 3, please. So the value chain emissions, this is this upstream and downstream that I mentioned earlier. Employee business travel, expense claims, you can get data from them that's really valuable in terms of miles that the employees have travelled. Commuting miles. Now within Groundwork East, we did our own analysis last year and the year before, when it was COVID times, when everyone was restricted in movements, to see how many miles were saved in that year from people working from home. And then added in now more commuting, because people are now hybrid working within our organisation, and more people have businesses now fully at capacity with everyone back in their offices. So it's a useful tool to look at those expense claims and miles saved by not commuting, or miles that you are using commuting. Waste production, how much waste does the business produce? Are you tracking that at all? Do you have any spreadsheets set up to track that? Do you get any reports back from the waste contractors you use? Larger businesses will have to have that information for waste control and transport licensing. So you will be capturing that. But smaller businesses, you may not count the waste you produce as anything important, but it still needs to be included in getting an accurate footprint for your business. Transport and distribution in litres of fuel or miles, and as I say, the working from home saved. And also look at water as well, because lots of people forget that there's embedded carbon in the production of our water because of the energy used to treat it, and so that's why it's in the value chain emissions of scope 3. So if you can move on, please, Ellen. So once you've got your data and you know from your bills and the information you've collected in spreadsheets, you can then use lots of free information out there to get your own carbon footprint. The Carbon Charter, which has been one of our products that we've been involved with for over 10 years as Groundwork East, has a free tool on the website, which is the link there, carboncharter.org/footprint. And all you have to do is generate a login, and then you can put your data into that tool, and it will come out with your footprint for your business. Now that tool relies on UK carbon conversion factors, which are set every year by government according to international protocols, and also decarbonisation of the grid as well changes the values that we put on the different factors for calculating carbon emissions from your kilowatt hours used or your mileage used and the fuel that you've used. So those tools are really valuable, because every year they're being updated to those conversion factors, so you don't have to think about that. but it's just important to know that the science behind it is always being tracked now to make sure that footprint that you get is current for that year that you're in, so you can trust it. You can also contact us through the Carbon Charter if you want help with that footprint, or it's not working. Someone will be able to do that for you and help with that. It's not working in the terms that you don't know which bit of information to put in where. The tool will work for all businesses, but it's just whether somebody's not finding it very user friendly. We can demystify it for you. The next step, please. Next slide, please, Ellen. So once you've thought about all these things that the business is doing already, how can you make some improvements? Because you found out what energy usage and emissions you have. You've got your carbon footprint, hopefully. But now you need to think about how you can reduce your carbon emissions, because that's what it's all about, getting on the road to net zero carbon emissions. So I'm going to talk about now some real life examples. So there's building efficiency improvements that you can make if you've got an office space. I know some businesses lease their spaces, but they can talk to the landlord about quick wins, mid-term investments if you're in a longer lease. If you own your own premises, then it's important always to go around and check things within that building to make sure that you are aware of where there's drafts and things that can be improved, to make sure that heat loss from that building is minimised, because that's basically pound notes going out the door. If you're letting heat escape, you're letting money escape, and it's getting more and more expensive, as we all know, to heat and keep businesses cool in the summer as well. And then transport efficiency improvements. What are the quick wins there and the mid-term investments? So I'll start by the next slide on the building efficiency improvements, thanks. So as I say, we need to all think about how well our premises insulated and heated efficiently. So when it's windy, you really notice drafts, especially if you haven't got triple glazed or double glazed windows. And most businesses will already know where heat is being lost in the building, because their employees will say, oh, it's drafty here, or the floor's cold, or this room doesn't seem to be heating very well. And that's why you need to sort of go around and do a little inventory and think, right, okay, what could we change that would be a quick win? Is it just that it needs more draft exclusion around the windows or the doors? Do we need to actually think about replacing some of them? And that's the way to think about quick wins, low cost options that you can do within a business. Most businesses have to have their boilers and heating systems serviced regularly, but to maintain regulations and to ensure that obviously you don't have to pay out for breakdown problems if you're not in a service plan. But do make sure that is happening, because inefficient boilers are wasting you money, and also heating systems that are not on timers and not thermostatically controlled properly. And if you have smart controls, do try and get to grips with what the numbers mean, and talk to the organisation that provided that smart control to ensure you do understand it. Or you can talk to my team at Groundwork if there's a problem about that, to understand what that really means, that smart control. And choose low energy appliances. If you're replacing any electrical appliances in your business, look for the A+ ratings. LED lights are always a quick win if you can switch out the light bulbs. Also, I feel now that we're all trying to connect 24/7 to everything, whether it be at home, a bit at work, to stay alert, to stay on top of everything. And we're all leaving all our devices on standby far too much. And actually, if you switch things off and make sure things are switched off and have a switch off policy within your business, you are going to save money on your carbon and save carbon emissions. So make sure that's enforced and everyone knows why. So if I move on to the mid-term things that you can do to improve building efficiency. So as I mentioned, for some businesses, swapping out some light bulbs to LED is pretty easy, but for other businesses with lots of spaces to light, you need to think about that being a mid-term investment. It will pay off relatively quickly though, because LED lights do act more efficiently than lots of the old-fashioned strip fluorescent lights that are in many properties still now. So do think about lighting first, and then move on to whether you can think about generating your own energy on site. Could you put solar PV on roof spaces? Have you ever thought about that? Have you looked at the cost? Because the cost benefit ratio of doing that now is much better in many ways, because the prices for installation has come down over the years, and now you're paying more for the energy you would have bought that you're not going to have to buy if you do have solar PV. So the cost benefit analysis is never been better in many ways. Off-site investment in renewable energy and technology. Is there anything else that you could do to make that switch? I would have said before, all the issues with the energy suppliers, a lot of them going bust. Think about switching to green tariffs as well. But I think lots of people are tied into contracts now and want to stay with the companies they most trust at the moment to provide their energy supply. But the other thing you might think about, if your building or premises at the moment isn't going to be improved without major investment, changes to the fabric of the building, or actually a lot of investment in glazing or new doors, things that are really going to cost the business when you perhaps haven't got the cash flow, you could think about moving to premises that are of a better carbon building assessment. Think about their energy consumption of that other building, and whether it would be better for you to move than stay where you are and retrofit. It's one of the things that a lot of businesses are doing at the moment, consolidating their many offices and only having a couple of them that are the most energy efficient. Particularly with hybrid working, that could be one of the better investments that you make, actually. Okay, I'll move on to talk about transport. So I don't know how many of the businesses here rely on logistics from other companies to deliver your products or services, or thinking about how you manage to get around all your customers if you're still out and about seeing customers. But you really think about route planning. We all now do a lot more virtual meetings, such as this webinar, but you also think about public transport for the staff and active travel within your organisations and your businesses. But there's nothing worse than someone going to a meeting, one side of the region or one side of the county that your business is in, and then another meeting the other side on the same day. So just think about that waste in terms of carbon emissions and costs of the business, and think about car sharing and maintaining vehicles properly if you have business vehicles. All of it adds up and can be quick wins to help you save on emissions, and to put in a net zero strategy action plan to say you're doing this shows real progress in the business, that you looked at things from the bottom upwards, rather than just necessarily saying we're going to immediately switch to an electric vehicle, which I'll talk about in the next slide. Thanks, Ellen. So if you're looking to invest in changes in your own transport fleet or vehicles that the businesses use, whether it's just company cars, then think about whether you can switch to electric vehicles or change the fuel use. Also think about if you're going to put electrification in as part of your charging infrastructure that you offer at your premises. Do you have customers coming to you that use electric vehicles and would really appreciate being able to top up while they're there? And obviously staff could make use of that, subject to a charge, because basically electricity costs are higher than they have been. So, but it can be beneficial to offer that service as a business and make it known that you are doing that. because we all need to move to reducing our carbon footprint from vehicle and transport. And I think one of the big barriers that we're hearing lots of times from staff and also from businesses to make that switch is, what about charging up? Is there enough infrastructure there for me to travel the distances I need to travel? So it can be a selling point for a business to have that in place and get more customers to come to you if you so wish that for meetings. And then also think about cycling, walking to the office. If you've got staff that could benefit from salary schemes that would incentivise that, that's another thing that you can put in your net zero journey plan that you're offering. All of these things hopefully are just giving you an idea of what you could do in your own business. Obviously no one size fits all with these ideas, but I've just pulled out some of them which hopefully you can say rings a bell with some of the activities you have in your own businesses today. But that's me talking about what you could do, but what about some real examples? So we've worked with many businesses through our carbon charter service that we run in conjunction with the local authority, and also just through other consultancy work we've done through our Groundwork team. But Precision Marketing was a really forward-thinking business, and they really wanted the support that we could offer at the time to go through lots of the steps that I've mentioned. So the first two steps about starting to review your energy bills and calculate your emissions and look at that whole carbon agenda for the business. They went through that journey with our support. They calculated their carbon footprint and got an action plan to how to reduce from that support. They also decided that it had to be a bottom-up approach and the staff be involved, not just the senior leadership or the chief executive and his directors. So they established a green champion to implement the actions within the staff and to think about how the business was using products and services all around what they were doing, and not only their premises, but there's other scopes that I mentioned as well. The supply chain coming in and the products going out. We also supported them, advising them on the waste and recycling that they dealt with. And they then decided to make the investments, I was saying, not just the quick wins, they invested in electric vehicles and solar PV. But if I just refer to what the director of that business said about it, because that's the best example you can give really, when a director actually is happy to be a case study like they were. So I've just got to find the right slide now, I've lost it. So basically Nick Sprite he said, becoming carbon neutral is something we have been striving towards for the past 6 years for our customers, for our employees and for the planet. Since the beginning of 2020, we have officially been operating a carbon neutral business model, but our journey won't stop there. We will continue to introduce new sustainable initiatives, new ways of working to improve our carbon footprint and reduce our impact on the environment as part of our carbon neutral company commitment. So there you can see a solid commitment that staff in that business can relate to, the suppliers that they work with and the people that they market their services can relate to, because it's clear and it's available, and they've really embedded that and taken the first steps and gone beyond it and will continue to do so. So the next example is Boxer East. Now, as you can see from these photographs, they had rather a large space to actually put in solar panels to create their own electricity. So initially, before they did this, they worked with us at Groundwork to find out how efficient that would be and the payback time it would take for that investment, because at the end of the day any business needs to consider that with cash flow. If they invest in such a large scale project as this, how long is it going to take for that investment to reduce their energy costs. In this case, they saved 50% of their energy consumption coming off the grid, so coming through their energy supplier, by having their own panels put in place. And it was quite a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5, that they installed this and started to see the benefits. But now obviously energy prices are a lot higher, so they will be reaping more rewards now for having their own energy production on site. I appreciate not all businesses will have that roof space to consider solar PV, but that's a good example of one business that's really benefited from being able to do that. The other thing that they did before they did the solar panels, though, their first steps was the other picture, which is where they looked at their lighting and they switched to LED wherever it was possible. And that gave them the first kind of initial reductions in their carbon emissions they were looking for, before they were willing then to move on to the bigger investment as solar panels. So the next example, this was a business called Lignosite. They were formed in 1947, so well-established business. They manufacture concrete blocks for the construction industry and for manufacturing plants located in Essex and Suffolk. We worked with them at their Brandon site in Suffolk. And what we did was we started doing the first couple of steps that I mentioned earlier, reviewing their energy bills with them and calculating their emissions so that they knew where they were in terms of their carbon footprint. Then we suggested equipment changes to make them more energy efficient models instead of what they already had, because they obviously have a lot of equipment that they use to create the concrete blocks. Recommended the use of low energy LED lighting again, and advised them on waste and recycling and how that was dealt with. And as a business, they were already looking at recycling their own materials into the concrete blocks where possible, wastage materials, and trying to build through their own research and development different ways of creating concrete blocks that would use waste from construction sites. So they were already thinking about that as a business anyway, to produce more sustainable products. But what we did was offer them further advice on what they could practically do within the business itself to be more sustainable, just by reducing their own emissions. So they were a really good business to work with. And then once again, if you look at the Carbon Charter website, that's a case study on there that pulls out how well they thought of the support they got and why it was so beneficial to the business in the longer term. So there were 3 really good examples. I hope some of the things that I've pointed out, those real businesses did, align with your thoughts or things you're thinking about in the business that you're running and you're representing today. So what about what's next for you then? Go to the next slide, please, Ellen. So first of all, I think if you're considering the first steps of making the change and thinking about your net zero journey, you need to start talking about it, get your own staff on board, share with your stakeholders, your customers, think about is it going to be really good for you in terms of your marketplace and your competitors? What are they doing? It's going to benefit you if it gives you more of an edge with your procurement applications and your tenders as well. So to do all of that, when you start talking about it, you've got to think about how you're going to track your emissions, as I say, check your bills and record the data, get to grips with the numbers, start prioritising some actions. What are the quick wins? What are the mid-term investments that you can do? And think about setting reduction targets. Now, at the moment, I think lots of businesses are thinking, okay, so local authorities have committed to carbon reduction net zero plans by 2030, but can we really look 7 years or 8 years in the future and say we can definitely meet that target? And I feel like lots of people still think, I'm not sure where to start with that. So I would say try and set something realistic for yourself as a business, and look internally at what other people in your own marketplace are saying. And really, you got to sense check that. Is that realistic for them as well? Because the last thing you want to do is set an unrealistic target where you can't measure progress against it, and you can't review and refine reporting against that target, because you just don't have enough information to hand or the knowledge to get you there. There's lots of help available and support, but you need to think about what is realistic for the business. So I've heard recently a drive towards 25% reductions by the year 25, which for some businesses, the next 3 years, if they thought about that within maybe their existing business plan, that might be something to aim for. So if you go to the next slide, please, Ellen. So I've gone over first steps, but I know that not everybody can relate to it now. Obviously, you've honoured us having time to come along to this webinar, which I really appreciate you listening to me. But the first steps that I've gone through and guides that you can just download quickly as PDFs are all available on that carboncharter.org website, the link above of the slide at the top. And what they do is they quickly cover all of the things I've talked about, in case some of the jargon I mentioned you just never heard before or you're still unsure of. And those guides are free to any business. You don't have to become a charter member to access those guides and print them off. And as I say, you can use the free carbon calculator footprint tool on the Carbon Charter website. And once you get your footprint, there's advice on how to get a carbon reduction policy and action plan, advice even how to get your staff engaged. And I don't know if any of you went to the webinar on Monday at all yesterday with Amy Courter, did you? She was talking about carbon literacy for businesses and what that offers in terms of staff engagement, because even now we have the people who don't necessarily believe in carbon change, carbon impacts. They don't believe in the greenhouse effect. They think it's just weather patterns changing and it will change back again. So getting your staff on board can sometimes be a bit of a task for some businesses, but getting everybody through carbon literacy training, or even just attending some webinars talking about it, like was run yesterday, is the first step to breaking down some of those barriers that you may have internally. We've all been through carbon literacy training in Groundwork East, and I would say even for myself, who is from a background of having an environmental degree and masters and working in the sector for quite a few years, I still had to look fresh at my own lifestyle and work practices to think about making a carbon pledge, and it was very useful. So it can help everyone. And I spoke about making your buildings more efficient. If you've got control over your premises, then you can make those quick win changes and consider further improvements. If you are renting, then do discuss with your landlords what they're doing, what their commitment is. They may have a plan that you weren't ever aware of, or it may well be they have a duty of care to replace things if it's costing you a lot of money now that you need to push with them. Explain. It depends what sort of arrangements you have in terms of how the bills are paid separately by yourself or within your lease agreement, if you're lucky enough to have that. Consider renewable energy, as I said, but when it's appropriate for the business. And think about transport waste and carbon offsetting. There's also guidance in those first steps about that. I haven't dealt with that specifically, but carbon offsetting can be a way for businesses to get closer to reducing their carbon emissions and net zero. So I just wondered how many How many of you are actually considering carbon offsetting at all, or thought about it? Yeah, there's a few nods there. What I would say is to try and think about something, when you're looking at carbon offsetting, try and find a scheme that's accredited, that's trustworthy and reputable, because there have been stories where people have invested in planting trees in a country they've never been to, and what's happened to that land site is it may well have moved to the time that you've invested in finding that project and paid for offsetting, it hasn't really offset the carbon emissions. So do make sure that you go through a reputable accredited organisation if you are considering that. So I'll move on to the next slide, please, Ellen. So as I said, the Carbon Charter is there. It's been around for 10 years now. It's been well supported by the local authorities in Norfolk and Suffolk. And it has supported lots of businesses to reduce carbon emissions and reach for net zero. It's an environmental award scheme, and it's created a sustainable business network for SMEs, because once you become accredited to the scheme, you are then part of that family of businesses that have all got the Carbon Charter. There's events and member only area of the website where you get access to even more resources to help the business. And the key to the certification is it's geared up, so the first stages, if you get bronze accreditation, is about you looking at what your carbon emissions are now, setting with some reduction targets and communicating that internally, externally. And then when you move through to silver and gold, if you want to renew it after 2 years and progress, then that's when it clearly shows as a marketing tool for your business that you're progressing and you're working towards net zero. And a lot of the businesses that we've been asked to work with for the climate change ask have become Carbon Charter members because they see the value of that network and for getting accredited. The cost of the Carbon Charter is in relation to the size of the business. So it does very much aim to support smaller businesses at a lower cost to larger businesses with more employees. So don't think, oh, I can't afford necessarily to do that, or oh, that's only for larger businesses, not myself. We have tried to tailor it to make sure we give the best value for money for smaller businesses through to the larger businesses paying more for the service as they've got more employees. And remember that your employees are key to making the environmental objectives and enhancing your reputation. So don't forget to take them along on your net zero journey as well. So last couple of slides. Thank you, Ellen. Next one. So as well as the Carbon Charter, Groundwork East offers the carbon management services listed here. We can work with any businesses as a consultant to work with you on establishing a pathway to net zero if you'd rather pay someone to do that than try to do it yourself or use the Carbon Charter service. We offer carbon literacy training. We did a really good project with a business called Urban and Civic. We're working with some local authorities now to train their staff, so we can offer that service as a consultancy. We can do greenhouse gas inventory and reporting for you. And if you're doing all of this yourself, but you just want some external assurance, then we offer that as an impartial service. So we're able to quality assure the data and the inventory reporting that you produced yourself. And then prioritisation of your carbon reduction actions. So when you go along the journey of starting to look at all the carbon emissions in your business, you may think, oh, how the heck do we prioritise what to do first? And where are we going to get the biggest savings? Well, we can help you to identify which ones will be the best approach for your business. And just to say at the end, we had funded programs in Be Anglia and other programs like Road to Net Zero that's been running all this past year with the grants and stuff that we were involved with Ellen and her team of Growth Hub advisors. And many think, oh, these funding schemes are now closing or have closed, as B Anglia did back in the summer. We do still have some funded programs available, and we will always look to support business with a funded program where possible. In Suffolk, we have a Suffolk Net Zero Consultancy Service, which has a page on the Carbon Charter website to help businesses in Suffolk. And there is some support for businesses in Norfolk, which I can tell you about if any of you are in Norfolk area. So don't think all the funding's gone, and I think that there will be a reinvestment in more funded programs in the future through the Shared Prosperity Fund that a lot of local authorities are bidding for at the moment, and other organisations. But that's all the different things that Groundwork is involved with. So I hope that's been useful and insightful into what other businesses have been doing, some examples. But if you've got any questions, or if you think of any after, then you can email me or look at our website link there. But I'm happy to take some questions now. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jean. That was very informative. We're based in Norfolk, Hethel Engineering Centre, so we obviously lease a lot of our area. To be honest, I'm not sure what progress they've made with, or even if they are part of the Carbon Charter. I'm sure they are, but it's my probably responsibility to find out that now. I was good. So with the funding programs that you just mentioned, if you could send me information from the Norfolk side, that would be really useful.
Yeah, at the moment we have one specific project which my colleague Rex is working on. So what I'll do is I'll get Ellen to email. She emails to me, and then I can find out a bit more about your business and let Rex talk to you about that project. We hope to have more in Norfolk coming through when I think more funding is agreed, as I say, through the governmental strands of funding that is available. But B Anglia finished and last summer, and that left Norfolk with a bit of a hole, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for us because we're quite rural as well. So some of the initiatives, which are all very good, and we have people coming in from all different areas as well. So some of those will be hard to do, but I'm sure there's a few quick wins that we can do in
exactly
the process.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, Road to Net Zero was incredibly successful, you know, grant funding, and you know, watch this space for what else there might be in the future. That's the way we have to look at it positively, isn't it, Ellen? Yeah. Okay, so any other questions?
Well, more of a comment from me. Do you think that we've got time to actually address these issues? Should we not be doing more?
Oh, yeah, I mean, as I say, you know, the drive forward, we've got COP 27 at the moment, haven't we, in Egypt, where internationally there's more conviction being put behind what they agreed in Glasgow, COP 26. So I think we are in a pressing situation, and we should be encouraging all businesses to do more. There's no question about that. But I do appreciate that, you know, lots of businesses have not made a start, and they need to think about that, which is why we decided to offer this webinar to talk about the initial things. But yeah, Tony, I think we do need to push ahead. If businesses are in a good place to do that, then this is the time to make the change and invest now.
Thank you.
Helen, Edward, Jackie, do you have any questions at all?
No, I'm fine, thanks, June. I might email you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can, Jackie.
I might send you an email because I've got some sort of random questions which probably nobody else will be interested in. So I'll email you afterwards.
Yeah, well, please do that. That's why we're here to try and help businesses as much as possible. That's why Alan very kindly gave us this opportunity to speak to you today about the work that you've done.
Great, thank you very much. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think just while we're sort of closing up, in case there's any other questions, I just wanted to let you know and just kind of reiterate what June has said. There is still some consultancy available through our funded programme at the moment, but it is all in Suffolk. There's some additional funding that June refers to as well, which is being funded by Suffolk public sector leaders. So please do get in touch if you've got any particular questions about that. Unfortunately, the Norfolk Business Pot is all taken care of at the moment, certainly from our perspective. We've got 4 more webinars that we're going to be running over the course of COP27. So we've got one tomorrow, which is elaborating a little bit more on some of those case studies to understand a bit more about the how-to. So that's being run by AMS consultants. They're also coming back to talk a bit more about carbon footprinting. So I know June and Amy mentioned some tools, but if you wanted to delve into a bit more detail on that, we've got one on there. And then we've got EP Group doing one on green finance on Monday, and then a bit about ESG compliance and supply chain next Friday. We also have an in-person event on the 15th of November up in Norwich. So if there's anything that interests you there, feel free to log on via the Eventbrite as you did for this event. I'm not seeing any more questions. June, are you?
I have just got one quick question. Sorry, you just zipped through the additional through the next sessions there. The more information on carbon footprinting tools.
Yes.
Specifically. Which one is that? Because I can't come to the one on Friday, but maybe was it on Friday, that one?
There's a Suffolk one on Friday, yes. So a few of us are sort of getting on the COP27 bandwagon. So there is one on carbon accounting on Friday being run by Suffolk local authorities. We're running it's not the same event, but a similar event next Wednesday on carbon footprinting. And like I say, you can find that on our Eventbrite where you found details for this one. So feel free to log on to that if you can't make Fridays.
Thank you very much.
Right, I think going to close it there, guys. Sorry for my snuffly voice. I hadn't realised quite how loud my breathing was, and it's lovely to hear your dog in the background, June. It's been really cute. Thank you very much.
I'm so sorry about that.
Oh no, that's fine. Thank you everybody for joining today, and I think if we haven't got any more questions, people are saying thank you in the chat, so I think I'll draw it to a close there. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks very much. Nice to meet you all. Okay, bye.
Bye.